Happy Hub Day.
Hi, Trace.
Hi.
Happy Hump Day.
Oh, and Happy New Year. It's the
Happy New
first one in the new
Year.
year.
Yeah, 2024.
Oh gosh. It's like how
Me
time
feel old.
flies. I know. Just feel
Yeah,
old with every year. I mean, we are
I
older.
know. Well, yeah. And
Mm.
each year just goes whizzing by.
And
It's
each
another
year,
thing. Yeah.
exactly.
What's the big plan for this year?
Big plans. Oh, get this program out for my business. That's a big plan.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good
Um,
plan.
it's a good plan.
Yeah, 2024 is the year.
2024 is the year to make things happen. But just
Yeah.
continuing to enjoy my life.
Yeah, that's a good
Health,
one.
a renewed health. I always like recheck the health situation as
Yeah,
well at the start of the years.
it's a
So
good one.
I
Yeah,
always look at
same.
health, happiness, like what are the things I'm doing that bring me joy? Can I do more? It's kind of a check. It's always a check and balances. I like to try and
Mm.
do it twice a year, definitely at the start of a new year.
Yeah, I'm the same with the health thing. It's a good one to just check in on at the beginning of each year, especially at our age.
Mm,
Things can things can slip and slide quite quick, can't they?
they can. But I have to introduce you, my new
Yeah,
co-host for season 3.
season three.
Season 3. I have my lovely friend Lucille.
Eh?
Lucille Smith is joining us for season 3. Thank you, Lucille.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for inviting me, Tracy. It's a real honor because I've been listening to your podcast, as you know, found it very interesting. There's always lots of stories that you cover, you and your hosts have been covering that, yeah, they're really interesting, things that I wouldn't normally come across, and stories that really get you kind of thinking about, yeah, do I really understand this topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what I can do to understand it better? And therefore, yeah, consider things a bit more carefully, especially in the work environment as well. It's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Mm.
So I've really enjoyed listening to the podcast. So thank you for inviting me to
Oh,
participate.
my pleasure. I'm sure you will help me think of new ways to engage the audience and bring some great stories to the table.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that we can have some more interesting discussions. I hope that I can bring another kind of perspective to things and have fun.
Yes, it's about having fun. This is what keeps me going. I
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
really
yeah.
enjoy doing this. That totally keeps me going. So maybe just want to say how we know each other.
Yeah, through work. Well, we know each other because we both were expats that moved from the UK to Australia and then met at work when we were working for the same
Oh, I'm
organization,
just thinking
doing the
how
same
many
job.
years.
It's about, God, I think it's about 16 years.
It is, isn't it?
You're like, we could have raised a child in that time,
Oh my
couldn't we? If you
goodness.
think about it.
I didn't. Yeah.
We didn't, but
It
we
would have been
could
a
have.
beautiful child.
It would have
Okay.
been beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's how we know each other and obviously started a friendship, beautiful friendship.
And
Yeah.
actually, Lucille no longer lives in Australia.
No, I am now in Italy. And that's another reason why I really, appreciate coming on this podcast because moving to Italy, I don't speak the language at all very well. So I'm excluded from these kinds of current affairs type topics because
Mm.
my language skills are just not good enough to be, reading this type of content.
Okay, cool.
Hmm.
And how long have you been in Italy now?
Almost a year. Well, no. Yeah, it's been a year actually.
Oh, well, so we might get some
Mamma
tales.
mia, Tracy, ma. That's the extent of my Italian.
All right. Okay. Oh no, I've heard you speak Italian. It's pretty good. Come on. Better
Uh,
than my Italian for sure.
yeah, yeah,
Better
we're
than
getting there.
mine. Mm.
Mm.
So we might even get some Italian content. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, there was a topic that I had thought about. I'll maybe bring it another time. It was
Yeah,
quite interesting. Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm.
So one of the first stories we're going to go with today that was found, actually, it's found by Meal, and she sent it to me. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I never thought about it.
Yeah.
And it's from a publication called The Swaddle, which I hadn't heard of before. It's the first time I've seen this publication story. But it's so fascinating. So the title of the story is We Have to Retire the Phrase Women and Children in Conflicts. And of course, today, unfortunately, we have quite a few conflicts in the world. And, you know, a lot of people are suffering during these conflicts. And the thing, this title, why would we have to retire the phrase women and children in conflicts? Well, the phrase implies that women and children together comprise as one vulnerable group. And that undermines the agency of women and children. Now, yes, of course, children are vulnerable. Now, the story goes on to talk about, you know, the conflicts in Gaza. I guess some people would describe what's happening as genocide because lots of civilians are dying on both sides of the conflict. So when I read this article, it's like it may be more skewed to one of the sides. So I'm not going to read it word for word. But I do agree with this whole stereotyping victims in any crisis. Both sides would refer to, you know, women and children because it reinforces the idea that this group is vulnerable, and the side that it's referring to is referring to the other side as being barbaric because they're, you know, taking the lives of this vulnerable group. And it's not something I can understand. We've inherited this phrase over wars and different humanitarian crises, and, you know, well-intentioned to emphasize the vulnerability of certain groups. But let's, you know, if you think about it, it's a bit counterproductive as well in this day and age because it reduces women to victims and men to protectors and perpetrators, which is, it's way more complex than that. And to me, it would make more sense if you had to call out a vulnerable group to say the elderly and children.
Yeah. Agree. Yeah.
Rather than women and children.
Yeah. When you started talking about this article, I think what you said was you'd not really thought about this before. And that's what I find really interesting about this topic, that even something that can be quite naive or something that you could consider to be language that is trying to do good, I guess, can actually perpetuate actions and ideas that can have quite a negative effect. So I really like that this article has made me think, oh, I've never even thought that is, you know, the potential harm that these types of phrasings of language that we use can actually create. And I know language can shape culture and it can shape society, and it does. But something like this seems like really, it seems like a naive phrasing, but it is interesting.
Yeah. And actually, as I think about it, the work I've done a lot of study around language and linguistics and how it talks to the subconscious mind. And if I think about that and how powerful language is, it's very, very powerful in suggestions, for example, for somebody to change their behavior.
Yeah, absolutely.
And their mindset. So it really does make sense that this is something that would perpetuate an idea that implies the vulnerability and helplessness of, you know, women and children.
Yeah.
And I know that women and children are disproportionately affected by conflicts in certain countries.
Yeah.
And so that statement implies that together they're a vulnerable group rather than two distinct groups, which is actually more realistic.
Yeah. And as you say, like that, the use of language can really alter a person's behavior. So categorizing women as a vulnerable group does, you know, not for everybody, but it can, for some women, make them behave in that way.
Yeah, like a victim.
Like a victim. Yeah. Instead of thinking, no, I can contribute to, you know, protection of others or facilitate conflict resolution, or, you know, whatever it is. I don't necessarily need to be a victim. Not, you know, obviously not everybody's going to be influenced in that way by the language, but there are going to be some people that will accept that that is the role that's been given to them. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Mm.
is the power of language and suggestion. But also, even with the positive intent, if you think through the positive intention,
Mm.
what is it? Because is it, oh, this vulnerable group and we should protect them? Women don't get protected. Children don't get protected in these disputes. We can see what's happening now.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Yeah.
I don't see the intention of using it other than to make the other side look like the baddie.
Right.
In people's minds.
Propaganda.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
basically the only intention I can really understand, because it doesn't protect women and children.
Actually, yeah. Absolutely right. It doesn't. It is just trying to influence something beyond that. Yeah. The other part of the article mentioned about how it can also have a reverse effect on how men are treated as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. And I said at the beginning, it makes men the perpetrators or the protectors or the protectors, which is also a little unfair because a
Giving
lot of men are
right
dying.
giving right to men being, killed or harmed.
Mm?
Civilian men
Yeah,
being killed
civilian
and
men,
harmed. Yeah.
which is equally as unfair and
Yeah.
unacceptable
Well, it's
as
barbaric, yeah. To
us.
be able, to use that as an excuse, well, you're not a woman or a child, therefore you're fair game. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there is
Yeah.
that side as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw there's like evidence, isn't there, to suggest that this is actually the case, that there are men who are, school teachers, doctors, normal civilians going about their business that have been kind of, basically targeted. They're not women and children, so that's apparently all fine.
I know. And you have women suicide bombers,
Yeah, yeah.
you
Mm,
know, killing
mm.
people, being the perpetrators.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have women in the army as soldiers, duty is to kill the enemy, pretty much.
Mm. Yeah, to defend their country.
And defend their country. So
Did,
really
did,
outdated.
yeah. So are they calling, to stop using this language, like this terminology, or was it just more bringing it to light, the fact that it's kind of creating behaviors that we wouldn't have expected or wanted?
Well, I don't know, because what it does talk about is a conference or some sort of event by the UN in October 2020 that talked about the crucial role of women in the prevention and resolution of
Yeah,
conflicts in
yeah,
peace building and
yeah.
confidence building, and the importance of their equal and meaningful participation to promote peace and security. So that was recognized according to the UN. But then the flip side is women's continue to be perceived as needing protection or the protected. But like we were just saying, it just propagates an idea, and that can be very, very harmful in the wider world, even in everyday life where there isn't conflict.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it dismisses the safety and well-being of men, but does not make and if you think about men, I guess maybe I think about adult men, but what about
Yeah,
younger men? Like,
yeah.
that are
Mm,
maybe children, but young adults.
yeah. And think about the conflicts that, in Africa, where there have been child soldiers, which is just barbaric. It's just awful to think of,
Yeah,
your young boy being taken away and then
yeah,
made into a soldier. But
yeah.
it's
Kill,
probably as
kill or
well,
be
again,
killed.
yeah, it's kind of, again, coming from this idea that women and children, grouped in as protectors and, sorry, as to be protected and to be kept safe, and therefore making young boys, perfectly acceptable targets to be used in this way.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
not worth saving in a
Yeah.
conflict.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
when you really dissect it, and
Yeah.
it's just insane when you think about it.
It is, yeah. Like you said, the power of language. We should all
Mhm.
be a lot more aware about that, I guess. I mean, and I think people are becoming a lot more aware about, how powerful language can be. But even in very surreptitious ways like this, that, the
Mm,
terminology, we have to just be more mindful. Yeah.
yeah. And especially as the stereotype that is more far-reaching in society as well. And that conditioning that it kind of reinforces. There was one more point I wanted to bring, perspective I wanted to bring, because I said this to my mum, I mentioned it to her, and she's of the opinion that in a lot of these places of conflict, maybe not so much Ukraine, but currently now, you know, in Israel, Gaza, I guess some of the women are more vulnerable in the sense of the culture. I don't know if that's strictly true. I would say in some cultures, maybe, like Afghanistan, for example. But that was her perspective, that, you know, women are not equally valued the same in all countries and cultures, even though we have a long way to go in all cultures, in my opinion. But that was her point. Sometimes they are, which I take that on board. But really, for me, elderly are vulnerable generally.
Yes,
and children, because they need looking after, literally, when there is no war.
That kind of brings up a point as well, doesn't it, about the elderly? I think. Well, I think there's a couple of really good points there that your mum makes, because she's absolutely right that, you know, we're coming from a westernized perspective. You know, we're thinking about gender equality, right? And if we're thinking about ourselves, you know, as well, you know, we're women. We don't, you know, we don't need to be protected the same as children. But yeah, she's absolutely right. That is the case in a lot of cultures that we're not familiar with, that women that generally, not just in times of war or conflict, but are treated in that way. And that's their place in society that's been kind of predetermined for them. But then the other thing is, you know, the fact that elderly are not being considered as vulnerable in this kind of, you know, that they're not being, I mean, they kind of are being included, because obviously you get elderly women, but they're not being included as a specific group, is also kind of saying to me, are they not considered of value enough to be protected?
Well, that's another question.
Yeah. It just when you said that, I was thinking, yeah, actually it is, you know, because then you get the whole ageism thing, don't you, come in? And that's a whole other topic.
It is.
Yeah.
They don't even get mentioned, do they, really?
Not really, no. Yeah, or considered, because they are in many cases vulnerable and would need more protection and consideration, especially in times of conflict.
Okay, what to think about, hey?
Yeah. So thank you for that one, Trace, because that's definitely one that like I said, I hadn't thought about. And that's why I love this show, listening to your show, because you always come up with these types of topics that challenge the ideas that, you know, how you think. Do you want to move on? Are you ready to?
Yeah,
Because that one was quite first one to, you know, get my feet wet with. So I've come across an article that it's by a lady called Erin Meyer in the Harvard Business Review. And she talks about when diversity meets feedback. So I'm not going to like verbatim go through the article, it's really long, but she kind of starts off saying that in the last 5 years or so, candid feedback has really become like a trend in the workplace. And she gives some example, like Google executives popularizing the term radical candor and encouraging that, you know, amongst that community. And that a popular motto at Netflix is to only say about someone what you will say to their face, which
I love that.
Yes. And, you know, that is not just in the workplace.
That's in life. That should just be a life philosophy,
yes,
right?
exactly. And, you know, well, I'm going to say what, you know, because there's also this whole social media thing. And, you know, we see it all the time, don't we, with social media, how it's, you know, if you know, typing away and, you know, if you go on Facebook and you see the comments, it just blows my mind what people would say, but they would never dare say that to somebody's face, or you'd hope not.
Yeah.
And then she kind of goes into the fact that there's also another workplace trend, which is obviously diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's like a whole organizational cultural shift that's been happening at the same time as this whole, you know, giving feedback thing and trend. So her article is about when the two kind of meet each other in the workplace, and how do we deal with that? And she, says that it actually can lead to more conflict and feelings of hostility in the workplace because of the diversity, or all kinds of diversity within the workplace that we're now seeing.
Yeah.
And that we need to be more careful and mindful of that when we are giving feedback. So yeah, it's great to have radical candor and all of that kind of thing, but it doesn't necessarily work in
certain cultures, as we
yeah,
know.
yes, in the diverse, community at work that we now have. So she gives some little anecdotes just to kind of contextualize what we're talking about here. That in America, that you might have to edit this, but I'm saying, how they give the whole, they call it the shit sandwich.
Oh no, I have to do that. Yeah,
shit,
I like
good shit, and
I
they
have a version of the shit sandwich. I say you always start with positive, because
yes,
that's the first thing people
people are
hear.
going to remember. Yeah,
but also if you start with the negative, they're automatically stuck there.
Yes,
because you
so true,
and they're not really hearing what everything else you've said, because you just said something really negative, and that's going already in their head. So you should always start with positive and always give double the positive to the negative.
Right. Yes.
Because then, so if
Yeah.
you do have feedback that's constructive, and it needs to be constructive,
Yeah.
this is what you do, and this is how you could do it differently, potentially, and the benefit, why. But positives first.
Yes, absolutely. So that is a typical American practice. So, I don't know whether they teach that in universities or not, whatever, but
No.
it's
always business. It's always
it's
like
how
a
it's just,
business
the
course.
culture is, right? So they would give their feedback in that way, and they would understand, I guess, that okay, there's something there that I need to work on. I did good at this, I did good at that, but this is what I need to work on. But interestingly enough, that same kind of methodology, if you were to use that and give that feedback in that way to somebody from Thailand, the recipient would find that hostile, because that's just way too direct. Even, the shit sandwich is way too direct.
Same with Japan.
For that culture. Yes, exactly. A lot of the Asian cultures would be like that. But then if you gave that exact same feedback to a Ukrainian person, it would be just, the message would get lost, because they'd be like, what are you actually trying to say? They just want you to punch them in the face with the negative feedback so they know where they stand. So I guess that's what she was kind of saying, that this whole, that's cultural diversity that she's like specifically highlighting there.
Yeah.
And how that can, we really need to consider who we are conversing with, and then find some kind of compromise as to how we're going to match that cultural expectation of how, the conversation or the language that we're using.
Yeah. And does that not take you back to when we used to work together?
And that's my question.
Because we used to work in a global company.
Yes.
And us specifically worked with different countries directly. So we worked with China, we worked with Japan, we worked with Korea, worked with Thai,
all of it.
Turkey, America, France.
South America, everything. Yeah.
Everything. So we've worked with people, and we see it play out. See the conflicts and the maybe more tension and judgments.
Yes.
As well, because and I'll be honest, I've been part of that judgment. I'll put my hands up, because I didn't understand.
Yeah.
I did, because my personal thing is just give it me straight. But I've learned to do better now. I do better since. But you've got the criticism where in some of the Asian cultures they don't say very much, and they're more indirect in how they communicate.
Yeah.
And if you're just going to be outright no, then that's going to be quite offensive. And also how they take it. It's not just being offended, it's more serious in some cultures, especially Japanese. Like how almost like their honor.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That is exactly it. It's something, that was going to be my question, Trace. Can you think back of the environment that we used to work with and all the different cultures, and I'm the same. I just want to know, just tell me, what is I need, I need to do better. I need to get done, because I just want to do my job and I want to do it well. And I think probably most people at work want to do that as well, right? You
Mm.
want to contribute in a positive way at work, but culturally, how that is done and how you receive that feedback can be quite variable. I was trying to
Exactly.
think of like feedback examples, but I think more for me, it was more the day to day actually, rather than, oh, I need to give somebody feedback. It was
No, this
more
is
even
day to
just the,
day.
the working kind of how we would all kind of get to the end goal together.
Mm.
But with some cultures, it would, it'd be a lot more open as to how that was happening. And with other cultures, it would be happening, but you would have no idea what was happening behind the scenes. So there was always, like you said, a bit of tension. It's like, oh, I just really wish that, XYZ would explain it's actually
Yeah.
happening. But instead, maybe if something wasn't quite going to plan, then
Mm.
you just wouldn't get any, you would just go very silent.
I remember somebody that gave me feedback, and it was often, I felt like they were going around. I got to know them. In the end, I got to know them well enough to know what was happening
Mm.
and recognize the pattern. But to begin with, I was just like,
Oh,
is they trying to tell me something? And not
yeah.
because they weren't quite telling me. They were kind of going around and telling a bit of a story, and is there something that I need to take away from this? I wasn't sure. And it was constantly like that until
Yeah.
there was feedback here, but
Yeah.
it was kind of contained in this diplomatic dance. And
Yes.
for a long time, I had no idea. It would be more that if I was repeating whatever it was, that then they would eventually.
Yes. It's almost like you got to help that type of person along, isn't it? You got to kind
Yeah.
of, so you're trying to say what exactly?
Uh, yeah. I
But yeah.
just, I guess, it's not. It's not straightforward because I know we say it's cultural, and if
Mm.
you're stereotyping and generalizing, absolutely, but you
Mm.
do come across the odd person in that culture who is completely different.
Yes, of course, there's individualism as well. Yeah, that
Yeah,
individual personalities.
yeah,
Yeah.
individual personalities. So you really
Mm.
just need to get. If I was giving advice, so you really need to get to know the individuals you're working with and try different ways to give
Yeah.
feedback and see what works best.
What
Because
works?
at the end of the day, everyone's individually. You can take these cultural knowledge of these cultural differences
Mm.
to understand that you need different approaches. But yeah, I remember giving feedback once. This is where I did it really badly wrong.
I want to hear
Really,
this story.
it's so wrong.
I love I love these stuff ups and I love it that
So,
you're so honest about them. Go on.
so this person had basically overworked an activity, and they were doing like they're working late, and it was for like we have audits, right? It was for an audit,
Mm.
and I mean to the 11th, they were like to the the 11th hour, and after the audit, I went to give them feedback because it was unnecessary. But I went straight in with what they shouldn't have done. That was my first thing. Oh, actually, no. I went in with I need to talk to you. Can I talk to you about this? What's happened? And sit down and in a quiet place. They're looking at me, and I'm like, right. So this has happened. We've had this, and you really didn't need to do this, 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 and this. I was like, it's can't remember exactly what I said, but it was kind of they weren't as important. Like they were doing things like creating file notes for things to say that was there. So that wasn't as important as making everything else being there. You didn't need to do all that extra work.
Mm.
Anyway, they thought I was like pissed off with them. They thought I wanted them gone. This
Oh
all came
God.
out later. But this is when I
Oh.
didn't do feedback well. I probably did feedback how I'd be happy to
Yeah, how
receive
you
it.
would receive it. Yeah, and that's probably how we all do it actually. It's
Mm,
probably how we all do it. Yeah.
probably. And then the other time I wanted to ask somebody something, and these are things I just didn't know. And I took them into a quiet room and I said, "Oh, I need to talk to you." And I was stood up and they were sat down. I can't even remember what it was. It wasn't anything negative,
Mm.
but I know that afterwards they felt really like I was going to say something terrible and I was angry because I was stood over them as well.
Oh,
Like my
right,
body
okay.
language. The body language is something else you need to think about.
Superwoman's dance.
Yeah. Body language is something else you need to think about when giving feedback. But yeah, they were the two that
Oh.
stick out in my head as me not doing such a great job.
Oh, too funny. Yeah, no, it's actually, it is a tricky thing. But so yes, it's not just the cultural diversity. There's obviously like there's a whole gender diversity, and then there's like in the workplace as well, you get the general like generational diversity as well, and you know, all of that going on. But I think what I was going to say, I had a look at the article to see, you know, is there any advice as to how we actually do this? And like you said, yeah, think about the person that you're actually going to give it to. But there's like a little rule that she said is something we can use. We've got the 3 A's of feedback. So the first A is that the feedback must be intended to assist. And this is maybe where sometimes people feel like there is another motive at play, you know, like what you just you just gave. Like somebody feels like you want them gone. That's not what, you know, that's not what I want. No, I want to assist. Right. So I suppose if you can communicate that in a way, it's meant to help, then that's probably a good start. Tracy.
Yeah.
The second is that it must be another A. Second A is for actionable, which that sounds like the example you gave before about where somebody was going round and round and round, like you just didn't have a clue you know, because, you know, if you have actionable feedback, then it's quite clear as to what it is that's needing to get done to make an improvement, or, you know, to do something in a different way or to get a better outcome. And then the third A is to ask if that person even wants the feedback, because unsolicited feedback can also cause problems, because it's like, I feel like I'm doing really well. And then you're coming along and you just, yeah, you know, stuck a great big, you know, downer in my upper.
Yeah.
So yeah, so those are the 3 A's that we can well, particularly in the workplace environment, just consider how we can give feedback and get a better, because that's, I mean, most of the time, obviously there's some people that, you know, want to give feedback because it makes them feel good, that they're more superior or whatever. But, you know, I'd like to think that most people are giving feedback because they actually want a better outcome for that person and for the team and for whatever, you know, project you might be working on.
Yeah, absolutely. I got actionable and ask. What was the first one?
Assist.
Assist.
So the intention must be good to start, you know.
Yeah.
If you haven't got a good intention, then keep your mouth shut. Is
Yeah.
what I think you're saying.
Yeah. But I think ask is very good. May I give you some feedback as the first thing you'll ever say?
Yeah.
But you obviously have to thought through
Mm.
how to deliver that type of feedback to this particular individual.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, there's also like responsibility to be put on the person that's receiving the feedback as well. Like we can't all be emos about everything, can we? You know, especially in the workplace. At the end of the day, we've got to consider that it's not just about us. It's about a team or a company or organization, or like I said, a project that you might be working on. You want the best outcome for that. So, you know, I can say personally that there are things that I would accept in a workplace environment that I personally would feel a bit kind of sore over that.
Like what?
But well, I guess, you know, like when we're talking about the feedback, that in a workplace environment, I just have different perspective. It's just like I said, it's not about me. It's about I want to do a good job and I want to have a good outcome. Yeah, I want to do the best that I can. And you want to do that in your own personal life as well. But I think sometimes when you're receiving personal feedback, it can be a bit more.
Oh, that's different. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. You can feel a bit kind of, you know, about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I would not. Like, I don't like that topic. Doesn't go with you. Doesn't matter. You know, doesn't do you any favors.
Yes,
something like
that kind of thing. Yes, something that you might really love. And then, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I think on feedback, you have to. I mean, it took me a long time to get to this point when you're receiving feedback to just take it and not say anything. And actually, I learned that in a recent training. They were to give us feedback on our presentation. I was doing a speaker's course, and we weren't allowed to. Or we were told at the beginning, you'll get feedback as part of the marking.
Yes.
This is how we give feedback, and you just take the feedback. And some people's default was to start defending themselves why they did certain things.
Yeah.
And that's something to look for at all. Anytime you get feedback, just take it. You don't have to do anything with it. It's a choice, right?
Yeah.
So take it. Because sometimes I've had feedback, honestly, I'd say 90% of the time the feedback's warranted. But 10% of the time, sometimes that's somebody's personal perspective. Sometimes there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know, sometimes people have different styles that still get the outcome. So sometimes I don't always take the feedback. I'll listen to it.
Yeah.
I'll consider it. I will always consider, because for the same reason you do, I want to do the best job I can.
Yeah.
So I'll take it and I'll ask myself the question, if I do this, is that going to get me a better outcome? And if I think it will, I will. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. If it's something I'm experienced with, yes, but it just depends what it is. You know, it might be something I have no idea about. Well, I'm going to think, well, I have no idea about it. They do. So it really just depends what it's about.
Yeah. We do have this natural tendency to want to try and defend ourselves or explain. And, you know, like you were saying, there's a number of reasons why you want to explain yourself. And another thing is as well, is that sometimes when you're working on something, you might have tried this and that and the other, and then finally you go, okay, this has worked. And then you get feedback about, why didn't you do this? And I'm like, I did. Don't work. So there's also, you know, you've kind of gone through it. You've done the thing. So you automatically want to kind of go, well, you know, and explain how you got to where you did and why you did it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, the article, like I said, the article's really long. I recommend people take a look at it. It also goes into, you know, the whole gender diversity and mansplaining, you know, and that whole kind of, you know, situation where as women, you know, coming from a patriarchal society, we often get that kind of mansplaining when we don't need done this before.
You'll have to explain to me the mansplaining idea.
So mansplaining is when you get a situation where a man is explaining something, typically to a woman, if we're talking about gender diversity here, and the woman knows more about it than a man, or the woman, you know, is perfectly, you know, capable of doing or has done it. You know, it's not new, but I suppose sometimes with the mansplaining, it can be quite, patronizing, I guess, would be the word. But there's also another terminology similar to the mansplaining, which is manvising. So this is where a man's giving advice, unsolicited advice to a woman. So, but yeah, the mansplaining is the typical kind of terminology that is used. And in the article, the writer actually says that one research project showed that men are five times, Tracy, more likely to give unrequested advice to women as women are to give it to men. And this can cause that tension that we talked about. Yeah, because it's like, well, you know,
because it implies that you couldn't come to that conclusion or didn't know that information or whatever yourself. And that plays out outside of work anyway.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
A lot.
Definitely. Yes.
A lot.
Yes.
And I think it's, to be fair to men, I think it's this idea that they're supposed to be the problem solver and
absolutely
fix everything.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
But it's disempowering. And I've really taken that on board myself, because my automatic way to develop people was to tell them what I think they should do. And that's the way I was for a lot of the years, until I realized, and this is really not easy for me to do, to shut the F up. Basically. Really not easy.
I have not experienced that myself, Tracy. Do you actually? You're saying you do it?
No, what I mean is I make sure that they have really thought about it and explained where they might find out the information, how they might go about it. Sometimes people want you to just tell them, fair enough.
Yeah.
But if they haven't asked me, I want to know if they can figure it out, because that's way more empowering than me just telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And they might find a better way anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's coaching versus mentoring, isn't it?
Yeah.
And now, you know, mentoring used to be the thing, and now it's coaching, and that's great because it does empower people and you get much better results in the longer run. You know, it might take a little bit longer to get, to get the outcome, but in the longer run it's a much more positive style of managing people and leading people. But yeah, what you said there before is actually, I totally agree, it's a society thing, right? Going back to what I said, the patriarchal society is what we have. That's the construct that we have become accustomed to. So it's not like men do this, it's that's what the expectation has been set. I was even thinking when I was like little girl, it was, ask your dad if you didn't know anything, what's the hieroglyphic, dad? It was always ask your dad, and your dad was supposed to know the answer to everything. And that's the expectation that have been put on dads, men,
and women as well.
Yeah, and women, to put them in that position.
I know, and it's not very fair. And I mean, there's a lot of women that do it as well, and I'm just more conscious of, I'm not saying I'm perfect, I'm just more conscious of allowing anybody to, they might already know the answers. I don't need to say, oh, did you do this, did you do this? They probably, chances are they already have. It's kind of like waiting, what did you do, what have you tried? That's the best question. Moving on. Stories today. So this story, I don't know if I found it funny or not. Slightly, but not really. It's quite serious. Because he talks about this place before. So it's the Independent, the UK edition. And the headline is, lack of Afro-Caribbean hairdressers puts Black students off applying to Cambridge. And I was like, oh, really? If you have Afro hair, the expertise is needed. Things that are really basic and simple become quite a big challenge. And it's true. And then the story is around a shortage of Afro-Caribbean hairdressers in Cambridge. And it's been apparently deterring Black would-be students from applying to study there. And they know this because they did research out of all students that, I guess, from London in particular, why, they weren't applying to go, because I guess they're trying to change the fact that they have very few Black students. I think you pulled up a stat.
No Black students, between 2012 and 20, or as few as one a year. Yeah.
They'd accepted as few as one a year between 2012 and 2016, according to figures released last year.
Which is staggering.
Given that we have, that's not the percentage of Black people in the country. Do you know what I mean? So that's quite bad. It's saying that it was an unexpected finding. So they did a survey, and there's two arguments. There's actually two people kind of arguing different things in this story. And I agree with both of them, funnily enough. But anyway, Cambridge undergraduates and sixth form students were interviewed for the research as the university prepares a campaign to encourage Black students to apply. And he says they've been doing detailed research for Black students, particularly in London, looking at obstacles to applying. And number 3 on the list was hairdressers. Number 3. I'd like to know what number 1 and 2 are, but he didn't say. Really being able to engage with the perception enables us to how we're going to respond to that. Well, yeah, that's a tricky one. And there's somebody here that helps Oxbridge. So that's what they call Oxford Cambridge, trying to get the influx. She helps applications. So the hairdresser question comes up quite frequently.
Interesting.
Yeah. And if you're a majority group, you assume, you don't even think about it. You don't even think about it because you assume you'll be catered for. It's not even a thought in your head. But if you have Afro hair, you need expertise. You really can't just go to regular hairdressers. Tried it. And actually, I used to live in Cambridge. I lived in Cambridge for 3 years. And I would only go to the hairdressers when I came back.
Manchester.
Up that way, yeah. I'd literally go home for a weekend, so I'd go to Manchester and get my hair done. So
I used to go to Manchester to get my hair done.
Oh, did
you? Yeah. Same. Yeah.
So the higher education regulator wants the university to admit more students from ethnic minorities. But yeah, it's pretty grim. I didn't realize the stats were that bad.
Yeah.
And we were like just talking like, well, why? I mean, and so I mentioned the other point of view.
Yeah.
The other point of view was, it's called Dr. Tony Sewell, Chief Executive, Generating Genius, a charity that encourages youngsters from underrepresented backgrounds to pursue science, technology, engineering, and maths. He was saying it may be another lame excuse. Kids need to get more resilient and get with it. He says, as a minority, you will have to be confronting a situation where you're the only one. You have to face that and learn how to adapt to that. That's the key issue. That's what this man has to say. And I don't fully agree with him, but I partially agree with him.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to be flexible. Otherwise, you'd exclude yourself from everything.
Everything, yeah.
So he's right. But at the same time, you need to start catering for minority groups.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to, if the situation is that you need to, step up and, yeah, like he's saying, you've got to be more resilient in these types of situations. That's, minority group, that's what you're going to have to expect to be confronted with. Absolutely. But if I can apply to another university that's going to make my life more comfortable, then why shouldn't I? Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, why would I actually want to be the one black person that gets into Cambridge? I mean, if you have a situation that you have to deal with, then you'll deal with it. You'd hope so. But if you can find another alternative, then that you feel is just as good, then I'm assuming that's what these black potential students are doing, and they're just going elsewhere where they feel like they're going to be more comfortable.
Yeah.
And the whole hair topic might sound really vain, but I mean, you can't tell I've got my hair up and everything. But when I was younger, my hair was, I mean, I'm biracial and I don't have typical Afro hair, but my hair was, almost Afro, especially, during my teenage years. And I would feel like an outsider. I had friends with, what back then I would consider, gorgeous, perfect hair, and they didn't have any, and we'd have sleepovers. And I would always be really embarrassed of my unruly kind of mess. It was just a mess. And it was like that because I grew up where I was pretty much the only, black or biracial person that I knew, apart from my mom.
Yeah.
And we didn't live in an environment where I was catered for to manage my hair. So
Yeah.
I can absolutely understand how important it's not vanity.
No.
It's just this horrible, especially like when you're a teenager, it's just a horrible feeling of not fitting in and looking like other people. And yeah, these embarrassing situations like having sleepovers and things, I would just constantly just plait my hair. It was just nothing else that I could do with it.
Yeah. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
think what it was like when I went to uni, actually, because I went to Newcastle and I don't remember going to the hairdresser there either. I think again,
Yeah.
I came home.
Yeah.
There was more black people, I'll be honest, at Newcastle University, but I still went home because you had your hairdresser
You
in
had
there
your hairdresser, exactly.
who was Afro
Yeah.
specialised.
Yeah.
But also when you think about people that go to university, it's the first time they're leaving home. That, away from out of the comfort zone for some of them, looking after themselves for the first time. And that's all can be quite a challenge to learn how, you got to cook
Yeah,
for
there's enough to
yourself.
deal with. Yeah.
Got
Yeah.
enough to deal with without where am I going to get my hair done? I think it's a less issue for guys, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
But for women especially, it's
Yeah.
just braids.
And I remember being almost embarrassed when I'd go to, like a white hairdresser.
Yeah.
I'd be embarrassed because I kind of did, my hair just wasn't the same as what else they were dealing with. And I'd always
Yeah.
be disappointed, walking
Yeah.
out and think, just look the same as when I went in.
Yeah. I was embarrassed, but also sometimes afraid. Like they were going to really do something horrendous.
Yeah.
And it was never good.
Yeah.
But if you were desperate,
Yeah. Yeah.
for a
Yeah. Sometimes
haircut
you
or
get
whatever.
desperate. Yeah, for sure. And, it wasn't until because I actually started straightening my hair, it's chemical
Yeah,
straightening
same.
in
Yeah.
Manchester. I'd go get it done. And it wasn't until I was starting to do that that I started to get confidence about, how my hair looked. Before that, it was just like slap it back, flat, you know, because it was, quite unruly. But that's, it probably I had made it unruly because not knowing how to deal with it. Yeah,
Yeah,
not knowing how to
same.
manage it and not having like a hairdresser that could specialize in my kind of, curly afro type hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have ruined my hair with all the chemical straightening.
Chemicals. Yeah.
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 Yeah,
That was
definitely.
really the way to manage and make it
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
easier
Yeah.
as
And
well.
to kind of feel like you fitted in, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
That
because
that
when I
was a
had my hair straightened, I develop like you kind of get a bit more confident and
mm,
you feel like you fit in.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think I talked about this before. I didn't know what my natural hair looked like for most of my adult life because I had
Well,
this
nobody did, Tracy.
nobody did, yeah.
Nobody.
Because I had straightened it for years to fit in.
Mm,
But a lot for me personally, it was a bit deeper than that. Not so deeper. That's not. I'm not saying not to say that's not deep, but I mean
yeah.
a bit more darker
Mm.
of what was beautiful and what
Oh,
wasn't.
right.
So
Oh,
for
okay.
me,
Yeah.
me personally, I had that perception that it wasn't beautiful to have
Yeah.
afro hair.
Yeah. And now it's just, everybody wants it.
Well, somebody said,
Everyone wants to touch it.
well, I will have to touch it, that's for sure. But do you know what's funny? We talked about Cambridge. We did a story about Cambridge, season 2, episode 15, and it
Mm,
was about Cambridge University's canteen
mm.
attempting to be more diverse and creating different dishes from around the world. It's quite funny because
Did they do fried chicken?
it was funny because the students that were, but it was like Asia and and the
Mm,
students were complaining that this was not their food and that it was,
right.
and they were putting
Yeah.
it on the menu
It had
as,
been bastardized.
yes, exactly. They were putting it on the menu and it was just not their food. So they were there was a lot of complaints. I think it was on the university
Can
social
only
media.
imagine what it was like.
It was quite funny. I know, what did we say about that? We just said, well, they should have just a bit more transparent and said they were, the intention was to try. So
Yeah.
they should have just said Indian like or its style, as opposed
Yeah.
to, if you're going to be
Yeah.
literal, take it literally.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. No, but that is good that they're trying. I mean, there
Mm.
should be. I mean, the UK is such a diverse culture anyway. It's that you think about UK cuisine anyway. Surprising that they had to think about adopting, that because
Or that they got it so wrong.
that's they got it so wrong. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's funny,
definitely.
just going back to the hair thing. And like I was always trying to control my hair, the straightening and all that. It's really funny because, my husband, he loves it when my hair is wild. He'll actually try and make it even wilder. He thinks it's brilliant.
Mm.
And then equally so, my mum's partner, just the other day, he was saying how much he loves it when my mum's hair is all wild. And isn't that funny that, we want to aim for this one thing where
Mm.
actually the perception from other points of view is something completely different. I constantly, "I don't," whereas Justin's like, "Ugh,"
Yeah. I know, but
that's
like
made me big.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Like, yeah, it took me a long time to just, and it sounds cheesy, but accept myself as
Mm,
I am, and
mm.
not just accept it, love it.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
Took me
just
a
be
while.
comfortable and
Because I had to
mm,
grow out the straightening as well. That
mm.
was like a transitioning that was really
Yes,
tricky
yeah,
because my
yeah.
hair just looked weird for a while. But yeah, it's done. Loving it.
Mm.
Won't ever straighten it again.
Won't you?
No, not chemically anyway. No,
Yeah, no, 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 I haven't
no.
done that for many, many years. Well, then, because the GHD came out, didn't it? Solved,
Oh, it didn't
solved
solve
so
my
many
problem.
problems.
I still had to get it chemically straightened and use GHD.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
I know.
All good.
Oh, good.
So,
Yeah. I was just wondering if I got a what would you do? I didn't think of one.
I have one if you want
Oh,
to do it, if we can try
yeah.
it. It's going back to the whole feedback meets diversity thing.
Hmm.
And it's the generational diversity example that kind of came up in the article.
Yeah.
It's talking about Zoomers, which, the groups of individuals in their teens to mid-20s now, are being the first generation to grow up, being surrounded by social media and therefore getting in this constant feedback loop,
Right.
where you'd comment and somebody would, it's this whole thing. So they're saying that Zoomers are actually a lot more adept at giving and receiving feedback than older ones. And yeah, a lot more in real time. They're not prepared to kind of wait weeks before they give that feedback. It kind of happens, in real time.
Mm.
So the example was, well, what would you do?
Mm.
What would you do if a 22-year-old fresh out of uni with little no work experience in our field, let's say,
Mm.
came up to you unsolicited and gave you candid feedback about how you could improve your work, Tracy? And let's say the feedback was a little bit harsh because, it's coming from a Zoomer and they don't necessarily hold back as much as what we might do.
Well, if I'm being honest, and I
Mm.
am, at first my ego would be like, "Who the f do you think you are?" Let's be honest. That would be my
Go on,
first
have a go
thought.
if you think you're hard enough.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
that would be my
those
first thing.
ones.
Like, who are you to tell me how to do my job? That would be my instant reaction, but I would not
Same.
say it. I would be thinking it.
Hold it back. Yeah, same.
And then probably later I would think about it. Like,
Mm.
is it actually a good feedback just in a different way? And I might even give them feedback about how they give me the feedback,
Yeah, good.
but only after I considered it, whether I thought it was valuable or not. So I'd probably, if I felt it was harsh, I'd give them feedback. This is how I like to receive feedback. I say, I'm sure
Mm.
you've got valuable contributions to make. You've learned different things. Because I don't like to think that just because you're younger doesn't mean that you don't know something that I don't.
Yeah.
But if I just received it as harsh or,
Mm.
candid and it didn't groove with me,
Mm.
give them feedback. And then I would say that, I took that on board or whatever and explain why I would adopt it or why I wouldn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
what I would do later. But honestly, I would be thinking, who do you think you are?
Yeah. And I love that you're honest about that because that is probably probably how I would feel as well. Like, shut up. Go back to your toys. That's how I'd be thinking. But yeah, but the interesting thing in the article, so the guy that had experienced this situation is a lot older, I think he was a journalist. Yes, he was a journalist, and he'd written an article, and this young Zoomer had come up and said, "Hey, I think your article would be a lot better if you personalized it a bit, and then I'd be able to relate to your article a bit better." But that was kind of along the lines of what he was saying, but I think he was a lot more candid about it. And the guy in the article had felt the same way, had really taken affront to this feedback from a young whippersnapper. What does he know? But then did what you did, Tracy, thought about it, went home and was like, oh, actually, yeah, like thinking about the way my writing style is now, it is very impersonal. And this topic was something that could lend itself to some personal experience and personalizing it more. So he'd done the same, gone away, thought about it, and thought, yeah, actually, if it had come from anybody else, he would have thought that's good insight, but had, yeah, taken on, the issue was actually the generational,
Yeah.
difference. Yeah. And this is actually it's called status incongruence, which basically means that the status accorded your role in society doesn't match the part you're playing in the current context. So, in society, we taught to respect your elders, all this type of thing. Whereas in a workplace, it's more of a level playing field, isn't it? It's about what you can contribute. And if you're contributing in a positive way, it's going to have a positive impact, then bring it on. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I like that example because I'm mindful again. I don't know if it's because I'm older. I guess it is
mm,
that I don't necessarily know everything, and
mm,
younger people don't necessarily know nothing.
yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm open to listening. And I guess for me, it depends how they do it.
Yeah. It goes back to the 3 A's, doesn't
The
it?
3 A's.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a
very
good
good.
one. Thanks. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no,
That
thank
was a
you,
good one.
Tracy.
All right.
It's
Had
a
a long
wrap.
time. It's a wrap. Well done.
Fantastic. Thank
Congratulations
you.
on your first episode.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun. Had a
Yeah.
good time. Yeah.
Cool. Oh,
Really
wonderful.
nice to chat to you as always.
Well, you've been doing a lot more. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Until I see you the next time.
Yes, next time. Bye, Trace. See you.
Bye.
Bye.